Our next presentation and our last presentation is a session involving implementing Risk-Needs Responsivity Model for justice-involved veterans. In this presentation, Dr. Blake Harris will delve into how the Risk-Needs Responsivity Model, an evidence-based framework designed to assess and address the criminogenic risk and needs of offenders, and I think I got criminogenic right that time for the first time, can be effectively adapted to meet the unique challenges faced by justice-involved veterans. You will gain an understanding of how to tailor risk assessments, identifying specific needs related to trauma, mental health, and substance abuse, and apply targeted interventions that align with the veteran's individual responsivity factors. Dr. Harris, thank you for being here, and go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Judge. Can everyone hear me well enough?
All right. Whoa. How about now? All right. Wonderful. I believe this is where you're going to get some of your ethics CEUs. So I'll just start by saying, if you're following the Risk-Needs Responsivity Model in your implementation, whether you are working in the court or with probation or law enforcement or in treatment planning, you're going to be practicing ethically. So that is how it all ties into your ethics hours, and we'll get to it. Some of the things we want to do today is just review some terms. When we think about risk assessment, there's risk factors that are static and dynamic. We'll do a little overview of that. We'll talk about the Risk-Needs Responsivity Model. We'll talk about how we implement that within our Veterans Mental Health Department at the Texas Veterans Commission, and work in a shameless plug as the objective state. Just by show of hands, how many folks have heard of the Risk-Needs Responsivity Model? Great. And I'll tell you what, if we get reviews saying that we learned nothing from this session, I'll be tickled pink, because this is the basis of effective intervention through specialty courts. And I do work with veterans, but I've also been fortunate enough to gain great experience working with adolescents and adults through various specialty courts, so juvenile court, substance use, mental health courts, and now veteran treatment courts. So everything that we talk about today is applicable, whether you focus on adolescents, adults, veterans, or anyone. So this is hopefully relevant for everybody. We'll clarify some terms, and if I start to mumble or yell too loud, somebody give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, and I'll modulate accordingly. Some of the terms, risk factors, they come in two categories. We have static risk factors, and those are the things that cannot be changed. Those are things, like an example of that is age at first arrest, number of previous encounters with law enforcement, history of trauma, things that cannot be undone. Those are things that we really cannot change. They may be important for addressing or calculating someone's risk for recidivism, or the risk for future involvement in the mental health system, but they are not and should not be the focus of our work, because can't be undone. I was born in Irving. That's a fact that cannot be changed. Actually, I was born in Dallas, raised in Irving, so go Cowboys. Like any good Cowboys fan, I hate them. Anyway, where we're focused is dynamic risk factors, and dynamic risk factors are also called criminogenic needs. So those terms can be used interchangeably. And when we do case planning, when we do intervention planning, when you're setting up terms and conditions, when you're outlining what somebody needs to do through a specialty court, we need to keep those dynamic risk factors in mind. Those are the things that we can change. Those are the things that are in the here and now, and they can be augmented. Very important when we think about putting together a well-rounded approach in intervention that's going to actually get someone out of the system and back into productive society. So this slide may be hard to read. I did jam-pack a lot of slides in this. I don't intend to cover all of them. I just wanted to make them available for folks, so you will have all of this stuff, and then we'll give contact information. We can always do a deeper dive on any of these things at any point. Some of the criminogenic needs, the things that we need to focus on, are criminogenic needs versus non-criminogenic. I didn't identify those, sorry. Criminogenic needs are the ones that are relevant to offending, to someone's involvement in the justice system. Someone may have various risk factors that are not necessarily the focus of our work. And I learned this, and I had to catch myself many times in court, particularly when you're working with folks who are mental health, have mental health consumers, and particularly adolescents. We want to work on all these things. Self-esteem is not a criminogenic need. We want to improve self-esteem, we want to help that. But if the basis of our intervention, whether that be as a clinician, or as a probation officer, or as a treatment court professional, if we're working on someone's self-esteem, and we're not addressing the criminogenic needs, we're just gonna have a high-risk offender with high self-esteem. And actually, that could be more dangerous if we think about it. So you really wanna address those needs that are tied into that person's risk of offending. The big, well, I'll go back and actually just, for those folks who have eyes like me. So those criminogenic needs, those are pro-criminal attitude. Those are things that can be changed. There is, it says here, antisocial personality, and I want to be real clear that that doesn't mean antisocial personality disorder, because it's still a dynamic factor. We can shape people's personality, and what that means is how they see the world and how they interact with the world. So that is often shaped by their behavior. Genetics can play a component, but there's a lot of work that we can do as a support system to change that. There's also pro-criminal association peers. The quality of someone's peer and support network, particularly for adolescents, but also for adults, very relevant in the veteran treatment space as well. You need to address the peer cohort. Social achievement, education, employment, family, how well they are, whether it is with their spouse or whether that's with parents or caretakers, caregivers, or their children. Substance use, which is a big one, and we all know that the grandfather of all treatment courts is substance use courts. And then leisure and recreation, and I think that is one of the ones that's often overlooked. I think when we're putting together case plans, we're putting together things, anytime you remove a risk factor, you need to stack it with a protective factor. Okay, these are some things right here, and it does say 2004, and I look back regularly to see if they've updated this, and they haven't, because this is tried and true. And a lot of times when you go to a presentation, it is incumbent upon the researchers to show you cutting edge, this is the new data and things like that. I kind of did the inverse on this presentation, but for good reason. So some of the things that I'm going to show you today, even they'll have publication dates as far back as the 1990s, way in the back days. And the reason for that is to show that these are things that have been in place and have been supported for research for over 40 years. Or 30 years, over 30 years, I can't add. Anyway, some of the 8 evidence-based principles for effective interventions, you need to assess that actuarial risk and needs. And actuarial data, that is how they calculate who's at a higher risk for, that's why car insurance costs more for red cars, and it costs more for people under 25 than it does for people over 25. That is looking at the numbers and calculating risk, complicated stats that nobody enjoys. Anybody enjoy stats here? Okay, all right, I saw a couple hands. I'd like to meet y'all. They might have some work for you. You want to enhance intrinsic motivation. Motivational interviewing is one of the greatest tools, and if we have time, I will always work in a sales pitch for motivational interviewing. I think it's important for anyone that's involved in a treatment court, for your probation officers, for your peer mentors, for your judges, for your prosecutors, for your defense attorneys, for your mental health providers, and I'll tell you, it works almost like a Jedi mind trick. So I did all the training. I'm a licensed clinical forensic psychologist, but I rely on motivational interviewing in my interventions more than anything else. Anyway, you need to target the principles around the risk-needs responsivity, which we will, I'll beat you over the head with that. And then dosage. Dosage means you want to make sure that you are providing the right measure of intervention to the individual you're working with. Skill train. You can always build up skills. One of the best things for that is using things that are entrenched in cognitive behavioral treatment. That's the basis of many scripted interventions. And those are very important to have the ones that are tailored to the population you're working with, whether that be high-risk adolescents, whether that be veterans, whether that be people struggling with substance use, or all of the above. You need to increase positive reinforcement, and if anybody remembers what that is, basically you need to take the approach that what we're trying to do is shape behavior towards something, so you want to reinforce the behavior you want to see. So it is a non-putative approach. There always has to be consequences, there always is, particularly for those folks who are court involved, the or else. And that's important and that just can't be taken away. But we also need to make sure that we're putting in interventions and we're putting in goals for folks to work towards too. We need to engage in ongoing support in the natural communities. When someone's involved in a treatment court or they're involved in case plan or whether they're on probation or parole, they're getting some level of support. That is also not going to be forever. So we need to make sure that we're setting up sustainable sources of support in what is their natural environment. Not the environment they should live in, but the one they actually live in. We need to measure what is working. That means at the program level, but also at the individual level. And there's many ways to do that. You do regular check-ins. You can use all sorts of screeners and assessment tools to see how someone's functioning, how well they feel that they're doing in their treatment planning, and then measure that pre, post, and use that data to inform what you're doing. One of the other key things that I think we often fail to do, and I've been guilty of this in my work as well, is providing that measurement feedback. And that's making sure that all the stakeholders that you're working with are aware of what are your outcomes, what are your pain points, what are the things you need to tighten up on, and what's working. And if you find things that are working, do more of it. I am going to throw a lot of stuff at you. I'm going to try and not talk too fast. If I do, please somebody tell me to pump the brakes. But we're cramming in stuff that I would pound into the heads of postdocs and interns over an entire semester. So we are really getting the 40-minute crash course of a whole semester's worth of content. Here, the risk principle. Andrew and et al., there was a lot of authors on that in 1990. Andrews and Bonta have done a lot of research in this, 2010. Hogan Andrews, 2010, and it's been looked at over and over. The risk principle says you need to direct your resources and your most intensive services to high-risk individuals, and you want to minimize services to lower-risk individuals. Sounds like a no-brainer, and if you guys are doing that, kudos to you. Oftentimes, it can be hard for us, particularly when we're screening people to an intervention. We want to get those people that we know that they're going to be successful. But if you find yourself working with folks that are low risk in a high-risk program, what you end up finding, and research supports this hands down over and over, you're going to have high-risk individuals at the end of it. I like to think of it like this. If the police were following you driving for 30 minutes, what's the likelihood that you've broken some law that could be worth getting pulled over? An illegal lane change, speeding, driving too slow, eating a hot dog, putting on makeup, answering the phone, all those things that most of us have done. So that's one of those things where we really want to be mindful that we're not putting folks that are on the lower end of the risk spectrum under intense supervision. The risk, this is the basis of risk assessment. And risk assessment, I taught a whole semester on just risk assessment, and I will put on my nerd glasses and bore you to death if you want to learn more about all that stuff. Get a psychologist, they love that stuff. And they can do that for you. But you want to collect data and information. You want to look at those static and those dynamic risk factors, and you can use that and calculate where someone's level of risk is. That is a great opportunity to screen folks to make sure that they are coming into the right intervention level, and then also do it on the way out and see how those things, as you've addressed them through your case planning, through your treatment planning, your intervention planning, and I do use those pretty much interchangeably. So whether it's a probation plan or whether it's the terms and conditions and the plan for a court or it's the clinical treatment plan, when you're doing them right, they dovetail, and often they can be one document. So if you hear me jumping around with those terms, it's almost intentional. Also, this is, there's low, moderate, and high risk. It's important to focus on low and high risk. I still don't know what a moderate risk person is. And I would love to have someone actually explain that to me. The needs principle says that our treatment, intervention, planning, whatever, again, I use those interchangeably, should target those criminogenic needs related to offending. And I do go back to that idea of self-esteem. And I remember talking with well-intentioned probation officers and a judge who was like, we really need to build this kid's self-esteem. And I'm like, that is true, but we also need to work on what are the things that help them rob liquor stores. Because again, someone with a gun who's got high self-esteem actually makes me a little more scared. So we need to really focus on those things that are related to their risk of offending. And I would say a kind of a modified version of that, or just my secondhand interpretation, is that our treatment and our intervention plans need to focus on those dynamic risk factors most relevant to the presenting problem. So even if we're not necessarily focused solely on reoffending, we need to focus our efforts on the things that are tied to that person being unsuccessful in the community and why they had a touch point with the criminal justice system. These are those, I should have just used this slide. I don't know why I had the other one there. Anywho, these are the 8 criminogenic need areas. These are relevant for adults, adolescents, you, me, your mom, my mom, everybody. Criminal history, again, is a static factor. You cannot change it. You cannot, and you would not want to predict someone's success through intervention just on their history, because I think we all know and we all have many examples of folks who have changed. And many of the people in this room have some form of lived experience and have overcome a lot. So just because something was in your past doesn't mean it's enough to predict your future. So we have to stay focused on the rest of this list, which is dynamic. Dynamic meaning it can change. Those pro-criminal attitudes, those things that make sense that someone meets their needs by stealing, theft, whatever the issue at hand may be. And I do focus on antisocial personality traits, really emphasize the word traits. You may work with somebody that has a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. It's overdiagnosed within the forensic population. Oftentimes there are other things, other behaviors, even other personality disorders that are misdiagnosed or misinterpreted as being antisocial personality disorder. Typically, when we say someone has a personality disorder, you're saying this is how they see the world, this is how they interact with it, and that it's not going to change. Antisocial personality traits can change. Peers. Peers is one of the biggest things. And if anybody works in, just show of hands, how many folks are involved in a veteran treatment court? Great. Hopefully all of you guys know about our Military Veteran Peer Network. That's one of the programs underneath me. Our folks are there across the state providing peer services. Those are veterans, helping veterans. You can have that. You can have great peer mentors in adolescent courts. Peer mentorship is a foundation of substance abuse treatment. And when we think of any of the 12-step models or AA, it's all built on peer support. It is evidence-based, and it's been, I think, AA is 95 years old at this point or something like that. It's been around for a very long time. So it's well established, so it's definitely evidence-based. Family, and that means spouse, parent, caregiver, parental monitoring. Often if you've worked with juveniles, you know the kids are the kids are never the problem or the sole problem. You're working with a family. Same thing goes for adults as well. Substance use, we all know that. Don't need to say anymore. Education and employment. Those are some of the biggest things that we can help with our case planning, with our intervention to get folks settled. And we think about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you remember that pyramid, you need to start out with shelter, food, and a roof. Those are the things that are addressed through education and employment. And then I think one of the ones that we often overlook, and I've been very guilty of this myself with intervention planning, is leisure and structured activities. Finding things for people to do while they're in their intervention with us, but also setting them up for support, things to do, a hobby. Anybody remember the movie Demolition Man? All right, I love that movie. They put Stallone on ice for a thing, and he fought Wesley Snipes. It's a really cool movie. If you haven't watched it, you should. It does hold up very well. But one of the things they did was they programmed him when he got out. He's like, why do I want to knit? They just taught him to knit, so as his conditioning. So at least he worked out with something like that. So maybe try adding knitting to your treatment court and case planning. Anyway, the needs principle. That drives the basis of risk management, right? So we have the risk principle, so we're calculating how likely someone is to be involved. That helps us figure out who should be in what intervention, who is a good candidate for our programming and our treatment courts that are built for high-risk individuals. The needs principle also helps us figure out what to do with them when they're working with us. This is a foundation of case management, intervention planning, treatment planning, terms and conditions, and everything. And this also helps build the reentry, the step-down planning, the aftercare, the referral planning. The responsivity principle, and this one actually may be even the most important. And again, this has been a lot of research going back to 1990. I count time in Batmans. I don't know if anybody else does, but I was like, who was Batman back then? I'm like, oh, that's Michael Keaton era. So it kind of just helps me remember, you know. But this stuff, some of this stuff has been around and been since Adam West was Batman, some of the foundations of this research. So the responsivity model says that our treatment and our interventions should be provided in a style and mode that is responsive to the individual's learning style and ability. And I did tack on and culture, and that's very important when we're working with adolescents, very important when we're working with veterans, that you want to incorporate things that are culturally competent and relevant to the population that you're working with, but also the individual. Yes, okay, good. So the responsivity, these are the factors that make your case planning, your treatment planning individualized. So not every veteran is the same, not every adolescent is the same, not everybody that struggles with substance use has the same risk factors and the same needs and things like that. Some examples of this that I think are often overlooked is reading ability and language. So if you have an offender, let's say English is their second language, they were born in Spain or whatever, and you're handing them a treatment booklet that they have to work through that's written in English. How effective are you going to be? When you're working with an adolescent who hasn't been to school consistently since the 4th or 5th grade, how well are they going to be working with something that's written at the 5th grade reading level? They're not going to be able to do that successfully, and they're set up for failure. Presence of mental illness. The last presentation did a great job about recognizing the importance of someone's diagnostic profile, what are the things that they're struggling with, and how does that shape their ability to respond and to participate in a meaningful way in your intervention. One of the things that is often relevant, particularly for veterans, you know, there's been a lot of advancement in military gear over the last few decades. People are surviving things that they wouldn't have survived even as recent as 20 years ago. So we're having more people come back and more people survive. We're having more traumatic brain injury. And when you work with offenders, when you work with people that have been involved in the system, folks who have been through explosions, fist fights, whatever it may be, the thing that's always impaired is that cognitive functioning right here. And this is the part that gets hit first. Anybody play football in Texas? Anybody remember when coach told you to just hit them with your helmet? Spearing, I mean, you know, don't get caught by the ref, but do it. I've had a handful of concussions. I'm sure many of the people in this room have, whether that's been diagnosed or not. I know I've had a few concussions. I don't know if many of the people in this room have or not. All that's to say is, you know, that's something you're not going to recognize. That's going to impact someone's ability. You're like, why did you not make it to your appointment? Why did you not do this? Why can you not follow simple instructions on your plans? 3-part instructions on a plan. It was like, hey, before I see you in the court again, I want you to do X, Y, Z. That may be too much. Maybe you just start with X. And then how do we make sure you're going to get to X? And it may be somebody that presents as high functioning. It may be somebody that doesn't have any outward signs that they have a cognitive impairment. So that's something that is really relevant to the responsivity component of our planning. Oh, one last bit on that. Protective factors. Lean on people's strengths. If somebody's good at something, somebody has an interest in something, as long as it's not crack or fist fights, let's figure out a way to lean into it and incorporate it into the work we do with them. Okay. Little bit about motivational interviewing. It's fantastic. Now, the folks who started, and again, back in 1984, which technically would have still been Adam West era Batman, the motivational interviewing is something that is open source. The researchers who found it most effective, they started doing it with smoking cessation, stopping smoking. I don't know why I'm using my big words. And then also with substance use treatment. But it is so easy to get a hold of, so easy to use. Judges, everybody involved in the justice system should go through motivational, and that it goes for officers and correctional officers, but also law enforcement on the street, how to engage people. You can have meaningful interactions and there's a lot of research on it. 15-minute interaction can actually help someone decide whether or not they're gonna be engaged. You want someone to work a plan, you want someone to be effective and bought into their terms and conditions, you need to work at that motivation. There are stages of change. This is not necessarily, motivational interviewing is built around this. This is the trans-theoretical model of change. There's pre-contemplation. The short version of that is, I'm good, I don't need anything, you can't help me. Contemplation is like, all right, I kind of got a problem with this. Maybe I got a problem with arguing with my wife, or maybe I got a problem with drinking and driving, or maybe blah, 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 blah. So they're considering that they have a problem. They don't want to change it, but they're aware that something isn't right. Preparation is, all right, I got a problem. I know I'm going to fix it. I'm going to. I'm going to go to the gym. One day, I will. I'm in preparation. I'm preparing for the gym. Then there's action. That's, I'm working on it. When you get with someone, particularly if they may know that joining a treatment court, they may know that the intervention that's put in place on them through probation or parole or whatever it may be is right and what they should be doing, but they may not be in action. So we need to make sure that we assess and we know where folks are. Motivational interviewing can be a great tool to get folks from contemplation or even pre-contemplation towards preparation. So action is, I'm working on it. Maintenance is that sustained thing. And that's where, if we think about traditional 12-step models, folks are still counting the day, the month, the year that they have of sobriety. That is maintenance. And one of the things that we need to just remember is this is not linear. You don't go from one step to the next, to the next, to the next. It's a circle, and you can roll all the way around that. Around the holidays, I get motivated to go to the gym. Maybe afterwards, I'm like, I'm fine. And I go back to contemplation. And then I go back into maybe action for a few months. Maintenance is that sustained one, but relapse is part of progress. That is the basis of classical operant conditioning. If we think about the old behavioral stuff and running rats in the box and things like that, approximation to the target goal is good. Anything that's forward progress is fine, but we should assume, and it's the old adage, 2 forward, 1 back. 2 forward, 1 back is still a gain of 1. Yeah, I double checked my math there. So all that's to say is relapse is part of it. So you may have someone that's working their way through the phases of your intervention. They may be doing well, and then they may crash and burn. And that's okay. That doesn't mean they go back to pre-contemplation. They may jump right back into action, or they may go back into contemplation or be on the fence. Maybe I should change. Maybe this is how I should be. And then we can work through motivational interviewing to get them back motivated, get them back engaged, preparation, action, maintenance. Anyway, it's evidence-based. It's been around. You can find a number of organizations that can do training on motivational interviewing. That's the great thing about it. These people knew it worked, and they put it out there for everyone to use. It's not proprietary. You don't have to go through any one organization to get it. Nobody holds the keys to motivational interviewing. We can all access it. That's enough on that. 16 minutes. Whew. Okay. Here's just a list. I just provided it, and you'll have these slides. I can send them to them. I think you'll also be able to get it through the JSMH, but these are some of the things that are shown most effective when you're working with justice-involved individuals. Again, adolescents, veterans, adults, children, anything in between. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Short version of that, I think of Reese's peanut butter cups. Somebody was like, wow, we need to address the way these people think and how they engage with the world, and that will change their behavior. And somebody's like, well, if we just reinforce the behavior we want to see, that's going to change the way they think. And then somebody had the great idea to put that peanut butter and chocolate together, and it's like, whoa, this is really cool. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. And I do have a doctorate, but that's the best explanation of it you're going to find. Motivational interviewing, cognitive processing therapy, that is a scripted thing that has a finite number of sessions. It can be really great. You can have some of your treatment providers maybe get trained in that and incorporate that into your treatment court. EMDR is one of shown effective, prolonged exposure. Those three are focused on folks who have trauma backgrounds. What do you think the likelihood of someone who's involved in the justice system having a trauma background? 1 to 1? pretty much. The peer model. I just put it as the peer model because there's so many different peer interventions, but you need to incorporate peers somehow into your programming. The Columbia Protocol, that's for screening for suicide risk. If anybody wants to learn more about that, I think everybody can be a gatekeeper, everybody should be a gatekeeper for suicide prevention. My team, and this is not just a plug, we do a lot of training on suicide prevention for anybody in the community, no cost, that kind of stuff, but so does a lot of people. Texas Suicide Prevention Collaborative is a great partner. That's I'm on their a committee in them, but they're a great statewide organization that provides a lot of training and stuff like that. The CSSRS is a great screener. It's tailored and shown effective through Columbia University for adolescents. They have it for law enforcement. They have it for first responders. They have it for veterans and military. They have it for kids. It's been, it's fantastic. You want to learn more, give me a holler. Mental health first aid, it's a great tool. It's a great training. Counseling on access to lethal means. I could talk for an hour just about suicide risk, but we're going to move forward. And ASK, which is gatekeeper training. Okay, putting this kind of all together, the Risk-Needs Responsivity Model helps us as folks who are charged with making a meaningful impact for folks who are justice involved with asking the right and answering the right questions. I think of the risk needs component as saying who needs treatment and who needs intervention. You may have someone that comes through your radar, that a first-time offender, they got a lot of protective factors, they made a mistake. That's probably someone we shouldn't mess with. Also, what type and what intensity, what level, that dosage, what do they need to match their risk needs profile? Responsivity helps us ask the questions, all right, how would they best benefit from what we have to offer? What are some of the deficits that could present barriers? How do we overcome those? And how do we work in the strength-based approach? Because if everything is stick and no carrot, you're not going to get very far for very long. And I hope this doesn't sound preachy. I'm not trying to. You guys hopefully know this stuff, and I see some head nodding, so I feel like I'm on the right spot. But I do want to proselytize a little bit. Here's some more contemporary research findings, and I kind of do that tongue-in-cheek because if you look at the dates, it's 1998 and 2010. Now, us as researchers are charged with any time, or I don't really do research. I mean, I do, but anyway. All that's to say is you want to have most contemporary findings and things like that. But I'm showing that these things are well established and they've been proven true over and over and over. The severity of an offense is not a strong indicator of future offending. Just because someone, even if they've offended 5 times before or if they've just had one, just because it's a severe offense, and I mean like something that is aggravated or doesn't mean in and of itself that that's going to be a predictor of future offending. But those tested static and dynamic risk factors certainly are. Risk assessment and risk management. I think we talked about this. Focusing on the individual's risks helps us provide what program assignment drives our interventions. It shapes all of those plans again, and this is the anchor to evaluate the progress at the individual level of your programming. So when you're looking, whether you're receiving grant funds or you're self-funded or whatever your stakeholders are, there's always a power IB that wants to know, is this working? And you should want to know if your stuff's working as well. Tracking the individual through these things and using risk management tools is a great way to do that. I think we've covered this. So basically, we're trying to address the things that are individual, and we want to step them down into the least restrictive level of care. I've done this, and I feel terrible now that knowing what I've learned over the course of my career, well-intentioned, trying to help folks, making recommendations to judges on what level of care someone needs, that I think this is someone like, they're doing pretty good, but man, if we could just spend 6 to 8 months with them, they're going to be so much better. And unfortunately, I'm sure in many instances, maybe I may have helped recommend things that were maybe more harmful. So the idea is you want to make sure that we get people to the least level of touch is kind of how I think about it. And don't overcook a cake, don't over-treatment, and don't over-supervise an individual who doesn't need it. Those individual treatment plans address the dynamic risk factors again, but they also need to tie into what we know about that person's trauma, substance use, current use, and their mental health history and their mental health struggles in the real time. Psychological testing is the way to do that. That's not a plug for psychologists, but that's our bag. Assessment is really the thing that we should be working on. Low-risk individuals. So what is a low-risk individual? That's somebody that has few risk factors, they require minimal or no intervention. And I think this is one of the things from 2009, but it's been proven multiple times. This isn't just one study. Most low-risk individuals are unlikely to reoffend if you do nothing. But mixing low-risk individuals with high-risk individuals will definitely make a high-risk individual. You can have 99 parts clean water, but you drop in mud, you got 100% muddy water. I'm kind of slow sometimes, and I think in analogies, so sorry if you're like, what is he talking about mud for? Anyway, high-risk individuals, they have multiple risk factors, so not just one. You're going to see a myriad of risk factors present in a high-risk individual, and they are the ones that require most of our attention. Now, here's where I do the shameless plug in the remaining 8 minutes. We're the Texas Veterans Commission. We are not the VA. We are not the VA. We are not the VA. I get a lot of their hate mail every now and again, and then surveys is like, you denied my appointment. I'm like, we don't even do that. We're state government, so I do work for the state. Every state has a Veterans Affairs at the state level. That's us. What we do is we help veterans with claims, the Veteran County Service Officer. Ooh, some mood lighting, I like it. All right, we should have started like this. I feel more confident now. Education, employment, entrepreneur, blah, 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 some other programs, and I'm done. No, was that the hurry up or get out? It says I got 7 minutes. Our TVC does a lot for veterans. We work great with the VA, so we do, no shade on them. They're the biggest healthcare organization in the entire world, so they can't be everywhere at once. There's plenty of skin in the game. We work with them. This is what our department is made up of. We have our rural and community faith-based partnerships. In that program, we engage everyone we can across the state on how to advance knowledge about veteran and just general mental health constructs like risk factors, also what services are available, and trauma-informed care. We have a homeless veteran program. We know that those individuals that struggle with mental health issues and are justice involved are at extreme risk of being homeless. And veterans in particular are at advanced risk of experiencing homelessness at some point. So that's why the homeless program's under me in the mental health department. We have our justice involved veteran program. Hopefully you know we've got our program managers here, Ms. Cynthia Gray and Terry Williams. They provide technical assistance and training to veteran treatment courts. We also provide the report to the legislature on them. Happy to say for 2 years in a row, we have 100% compliance with everybody sending us our data. A lot of browbeating and a lot of extra emails, so thank you folks for participating. We have our military veteran peer network, and those are folks that we certify. It is our program, but we do not do it alone. These are folks that are embedded in your local mental health authorities. They are certified and trained by us to offer individual and group-based peer support. They are also go into your jails. They also go into the prison. We have a great partnership with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for the programming that is for veterans there and help with the reentry because peer services is a linchpin. And particularly when you work with law enforcement, first responders, and veterans, they're gonna accept help and they're gonna talk to another peer, a veteran, more than they're gonna talk to a psychologist or a counselor or a judge or a probation officer. That can be the foot in the door. That can be the bridge to getting someone into your services and keeping them successful. We also have our provider training program because we want to make sure that the people that are out in the community are competent and work with the right thing. Anybody ever called a Marine a soldier? Those chuckles mean, don't do it. You want to know your terms, you want to know the branches, you want to know a little bit about the population you're working with. Veterans have unique risk factors and they have unique protective factors just like adolescents or any other demographic. Veteran suicide prevention. Veterans are dying by suicide at higher rates than non-veterans. Texas, we have the highest concentration of veterans. We just 2 years ago outpaced California. More veterans are here, more women veterans are here. Veterans are dying by higher rates. They're an extreme high-risk population, as well as transition age foster youth. So those folks that are working their way where they're moving where they could be in a juvenile court system into adult, those are also a high-risk population. I'm very honored to be part of the JSMH as a commissioner, where I know a lot of focus is on this, but then also with our statewide Behavioral Health Coordinating Council. I'm the co-chair of that. You heard from our chair, Dr. Courtney Harvey, earlier today. Suicide prevention is the biggest priority for all of us. We do training, technical assistance, resource coordination, working with the state legislature on initiatives. Anybody excited about legislative session? Oh, it's already started. It started like 2 months ago, so in my opinion. And then working with local stakeholders for veteran advocacy. We work with anybody out of any branch, regardless of service, good discharge, bad discharge, anything in between. If you got your hurt and washed out of boot camp, or you got injured in a recruiter's office, we're gonna find some kind of service for you. So everything we do, free of charge. We're state government. We don't charge for anything. Our Justice Involved Veteran Program, I'm gonna end focusing on this among the other programs. We integrate that risk need component when we think about those folks who have been involved in the justice system. No surprise here, they're at advanced risk for being in the justice system again. So we want to make sure that we focus on that at each intercept. We're part of the Justice Involved Veteran Network that's run by the Bureau of Prisons and many task force and committees and so forth. So we try and work with any partner we can to improve the likelihood that veterans who may be getting into the system, whether that be working with law enforcement on how to recognize a trauma-affected veteran, learning folks, probation and parole, anything from soup to nuts about the needs of veterans and the services that are available to help minimize the touch, get them back in the community. These are people that struggle with a lot of trauma, and these are people that are at advanced risk for coming into contact with you in your course of your work, and we want to make sure we get them out as quick as we can. Any way we can partner with you at the local level, give me a holler. Here's our homeless program, ties into our JIV work. These programs dovetail. Our military veteran peer network, couldn't be prouder of these folks across the state. They are fantastic, and thank you for your support at the local level of the military veteran peer network and engaging them. Behind our 66 peer service coordinators at present, there's another 6,000 volunteers out there. So hopefully you've come in contact with one of our team. I talked about our training. Here's some of our initiatives. One of the things that I would like to highlight is we just launched our Texans Ask campaign. Start asking. If you have an intake or you have a screening process for your interventions, whether you have a veteran docket or a veteran treatment court or you don't, start asking if someone served. Please don't ask if they're a veteran. A lot of people don't say yes to that, even if they are. Ask them if you served and you're gonna get more answers. We have a whole toolkit on that. You wanna learn more about it? Let me know. Suicide prevention is our main focus. There's a lot of resources out there, including some of the things I mentioned. A minute 18, that's me. That's a QR code. We have veteransmentalhealth.texas.gov. We also have TVC's website, but this is a website focused solely on the services we provide. If there's anything we can do for you, let us know. And I guess I'll give you back a minute.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harris.